Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Darius, and here I am once again to talk about all things wonderful, right? And we're going to start a new topic of discussion today. We're going to talk about communication. We're going to talk about effective communication. We're going to talk about, relational communication. We're just going to talk about, communication in general and how we can communicate effectively and clearly, because I believe that the world would be a better place if we simply communicated better, or we communicated more effectively. Things would probably be better in our relationships, things would probably be better at our jobs, things would probably be better just all around, right? So let's get into it. So, whenever I start talking about anything, I like to, start at the definition, because if we don't properly define something, then what happens is that we risk not functioning in the way that that very thing was supposed to be, right? And we end up misinterpreting or abusing or just not doing clearly what that actual thing is supposed to do in terms of its definition. So the definition of communication simply is the expressed thoughts or the expressed emotions in order to relay a message across, right? It's simply to relay a message by way of expressing thoughts or expressing emotions, whatever it is that you're thinking, whatever it is that you've analyzed, whatever it is that you've observed, and you want to relay a message, right? And you express it in a certain manner. Now, there's two key elements when it comes to effective communication. There's two key elements. It's information given and it's information received. All right, it's information given and it's information received. Now, think about it. When information is not properly given, or it's not properly received, or the message is not clear enough, what happens is that there is miscommunication. There is miscommunication, all right? And what miscommunication simply is that miscommunication is when you've missed the message that has been expressed, right? Whether by thought or emotion. That's simply what miscommunication is. So when we think about all of the confrontations that we've had and all the altercations that we had and all the arguments, you kind of want to think to yourself, was it I or was it the other individual that missed the message? Who is it that misinterpreted something? Who is it that did not really understand what was being expressed? It kind of makes you start to think in a different perspective. Now, with all that being said, right, we've spoken about communication, which is the express thoughts and emotions to relay a message. And miscommunication is basically missing the message of the expressed thoughts and emotions, right? We kind of want to now go into the various dynamics of the message being relayed, right? The various dynamics. Okay, because if we can kind of understand the dynamics that are happening, we can kind of pinpoint, right, how we could kind of go about, just communicating more effectively. And the first dynamic is that the message was properly expressed, right, was properly communicated, but the message was not properly received by the other party. Right? And one of the reasons that could be is because, a lot of people, a lot of us, we have our different communication languages, right? And we've experienced various things in life. So even though, I could have communicated something to the best of my ability, right, in a way that I thought that it was good, the other person may not have received it well based on their past hurt, their past experience, level of sensitivities or insensitivities, right? So even though the message may have been properly expressed, but it was not well received by the other party. And this is where we kind of have to dig a little deep in terms of, okay, well, how can I properly express the message, right, in a way that the other person can still receive it. Now, the second dynamic is that the message was not properly or clearly expressed. And then obviously the message was not properly and clearly received, right? This is basically where two people are going at it, and no one understands really what the other is saying. No one really cares about what the other one is saying. Or maybe it's just a misinterpretation, right? Or a miscommunication to where, no one really kind of caught the message. So now they're just going back and forth. The third dynamic is basically when the message was properly and clearly expressed and the message was properly and clearly received. That's a win-win situation, right? And now we're all best buddies, right? Or at the very least, we can agree to disagree because of the fact that, the message was clearly expressed and it was clearly communicated and the other party received it well also. So the fourth dynamic is the message was not properly or clearly expressed and the message was properly received, right? So individual A did not really communicate well, right? But yet individual B was still able to receive the message. And the way that I would respond to that is just a level of maturity, right? Because even though someone may not have done a very good job communicating well, but the other party, has a level of understanding and a level of maturity to where they were still able to receive the message properly and not overreact, right? So with all that being said, I kind of want to go into various examples and even, little case studies, right? To where we can now kind of put these dynamics into work and be able to pinpoint, right, what type of dynamic is being put into place, right? So then now when we're having conversations, we can kind of understand, okay, this is the type of dynamic that's happening right now. So let me see if I could fix it or situate it. All right, now case number one, all right? I'm gonna go ahead and read it off of my laptop, all right? Because I'm not gonna be able to memorize this. So case number one, right? This is more like a relationship scenario. So Anne, after a long day of work, hopes to hang out with her husband. However, he had plans to work on personal work for his business. Anne doesn't express this to her husband, but she feels neglected, annoyed. She begins to respond to him with a disrespectful, undertones that then leads to a disagreement. Anne finally expresses to him that she feels he doesn't pay attention to her. Her husband, Bill, then answers, "Duly noted," and that's it. So, in terms of this scenario, what would you guys say, about this scenario? Like, was it a successful example of communication? What could have been done better, and is this anyone's fault, right? I mean, there's various ways that you can go about it to where, the wife could have maybe expressed it a little sooner, right, to the husband about how she felt. Maybe the husband could have been a little bit more attentive, right, to her concerns once she expressed it, right? So in this scenario, it could go either way. It could be the fact that the message was not properly expressed and that the message was properly received, or the message was not properly expressed and the message was not properly received just based on the fact that the husband did not properly address the situation, was not attentive, right? So we can look at this case scenario in that type of manner, right? Now, this case scenario, right, is also another relationship example, okay? Case number 2, Gerald loves his wife's cooking, but for tonight, there was something about it he really didn't like. His wife glared at him, waiting for his answer as she asked, "So, what do you think? What do you think of the food?" Now, Gerald didn't want to hurt her feelings, but he wanted to also be honest. So he looked at her and said, honey, I love your cooking, but this one, not so much. I'm so sorry. She then began to chuckle and said, yeah, I agree. Right? Now, what do you think is the dynamic for this case scenario? Right? Do you think it was a successful way of communicating? Could it have been better, or was it just right? You know, if it wasn't good, whose fault was it? Now, you know, I'm gonna give you guys a couple of seconds for you to kind of analyze this, right? But, you know, I think the fact that Gerald, because, you know, he was honest and didn't do anything to degrade his wife and didn't do anything to condescend his wife, right? He expressed his, you know, concerns in a way to where it didn't hurt anybody's feelings. And in the same way, the wife was able to kind of understand and said, yeah, I agree. You know, she kind of knew that it wasn't my best cooking, right? So, you know, we can kind of maybe analyze this to where the message was properly and clearly expressed, and the message was properly and clearly received. That's a win-win situation, right? To where both parties have that understanding and both parties are still, you know, very cordial with one another, right? So that's where we want to be at. We want to be in that win-win situation. All right, now case number 3. All right, now let's get into it. Now this is an example for a supervisor and their employee. All right, I'm sure there's a lot of us who can relate to this story right here. A supervisor was working on finalizing a project for the company. He had already had a lot on his plate and other projects he was overseeing. So he asked one of his subordinates to do part of the report to alleviate some time. As he was explaining the assignment to the employee, he wasn't very clear as to what he really wanted and just kind of gave a general explanation and iterated, all right, you got it, just write this part, add this part, and try to make it look nice. Now, after a couple of hours, the employee handed the supervisor what they did. Now, the supervisor reviewed the work and said, this isn't good. This is garbage. This isn't what I asked for. This is what I asked specifically. And the supervisor goes into extreme detail as to what he wanted, not like before. Taken aback, the employee responds, that's not what you told me. You only mentioned adding a couple of things. Now, willing to fix the problem, the employee requests to address the errors. Disappointed, the supervisor declines and says, don't worry, I'll take care of it, and sends the employee away back to his desk. However, later on, the employee finds out that the assignment was actually handed to another employee to finish the task. The employee became highly upset and offended. Now, I know there's some of y'all right now that's looking at this story and y'all like, yeah, I've experienced that, right? And so, you know, what do you guys think was this dynamic, right? You know, do you think that, you know, things were communicated properly, right? Do you think it could have been better, you know? And if it wasn't good communication, whose fault do you think it was, right? Now, granted, you know, all eyes are on the supervisor, right? Because not only did it seems that he did not communicate properly, right? But also, even when there was a willingness to fix the situation, you know, he just kind of disregarded the effort, you know? And I think with communication, there has to be a level of, you know, understanding and a level of, you know, compassion and a level of, you know, trying to understand from the sides of both parties. When we're communicating, whether, you know, you're the leader or whether it is that we're peers, right? We both have to make the effort of trying to, you know, understand from the other person's position. So, you know, we could probably say that the dynamic of this was, you know, the message was not properly, you know, expressed, and the message was not properly received, right? Because the employee, even though, he tried to fix it beforehand, but then after finding out that, the assignment was handed to somebody else, he felt some type of way, right? And who knows now how he's going to be in terms of, working with that supervisor, right? There might not be as much willingness and effort. So leaders, we got to be careful about how we talk to the ones who we lead, right? All right, now we're going to go into this last, example, this last case, right? Case number 4, where it's a situation between two friends, all right? Case number 4 goes, Rochelle wanted Jake's input on a song that she was working on and asked him to read over it. He read over it and said, "It seems okay. Is that all you got? It's not really captivating." Now, even though Jake didn't notice Rochelle was a little put down by his comment, rather than taking too much offense, she said, "Thank you, Jake, for your input. I'll keep working on it." Now, this is very interesting, right? You just got Rochelle, who is trying to just, get an opinion from her friend. It might have been her best friend, right? Or might have been just somebody who she typically shares her, songs with, right? And Jake kind of, says a certain comment that just didn't go too well, with Rochelle. But it seems like Rochelle was mature enough to kind of take in that criticism and kind of take in that comment, right? And still responded well, right? We can look at this situation and kind of come up with the fact that, the message was not properly expressed, but the message was properly received by the other party. And that's what I meant earlier before when I said that there's a level of understanding and maturity, right? Now, it is possible to where information that is given or communicated can be received well, but it does not mean that that's okay, all right? Because we got to understand that with various people and different people that we're communicating with, people are going to respond differently. So just because one person responded well does not mean another person is going to respond the same way. So we have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to, be better. We have to be able to improve so that we can communicate, to our optimum potential, so that we can be able to relay our message and that our message can be received well. Because if our message can't be received well, then after a while, either, you're going to have a hard time just trying to express your thoughts or emotions, or nobody's going to listen, right? And, we want to get to a place to where, we're able to communicate properly and people are able to, receive our information well. And even if there's a disagreement, right, let us agree to disagree, right? And keep moving forward. So that's all I got for the first video, right, on communication. I wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to keep it practical, right? And just kind of wanted to go first into the definition, right? And just understanding that communication is simply just relaying a message across by way of expression through thoughts, expression through emotions, expression through ideas, expression through however way that you want to express what it is that you're feeling, you've seen, you've analyzed, you've observed, right? But making sure that not only do we relay the message, but we relay it properly, clearly, effectively, so that the other party can receive it just as well, so that there can be production, right? So that there can be growth, so that there can be building, right, of one another, whatever it is that we're working on, right? So communication is key, all right? So stay tuned as I continue this topic of communication. We're gonna go just a little bit more into depth, right, about proper communication, effective communication, relational communication. I know some of y'all want to know how can, we can communicate better in relationship, right? So stay tuned, all right? Follow me on Instagram. Go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace.